Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 495, getting the pre-contest titters. Yeah, that's right, fucking titters, I don't know. The episode begins with Ash and gang hanging out by the Pokemon Center, the day before the Floroma Town Pokemon contest that Dawn was going to enter. Dawn was currently practicing hard for the contest, as she had her Piplup and Pachirisu out. Pachirisu used an electric attack, which got unleashed into the air, as Ash and Pikachu tried to teach Pachirisu how to store electricity for a longer period of time, so it could unleash it in bigger bursts, so that it could earn more points during the contest. After only a few seconds of charging and practicing, Pachirisu gathered up some electricity and successfully released it, creating a beautiful show of sparkling electricity, similar to what Pikachu had done at the very beginning of the episode. Pachirisu would do very well in the contest, Dawn thought, and Pachirisu was very pleased with itself for how well it was doing, as was everybody else, with Brock especially commending Dawn on how well she was doing, after only training for a little while. Pachirisu then went up to Dawn, and its eyes gleamed as it begged Dawn for one of her Poffins as a reward, and Dawn obliges, giving Piplup one of her Poffins, and she also gives one to Piplup too. Ash and Pikachu wished that they could make Poffins as good as the way Dawn now made them, and Brock admitted that Dawn came a long way in a short time, and he was impressed by this. She went from making Poffins that her mons despised to some that her mons loved, and he remarked that the recipe was too good, as Piplup and Pachirisu couldn't even focus on training anymore. They were begging for more and more and more Poffins, although Dawn refused to give them any more until they did some more training, which they had to do if they wanted to get in peak shape for the upcoming contest. Piplup's gleaming eyes turned to disappointed eyes, while Pachirisu's gleaming eyes turned to angry eyes, as it angrily used Discharge on Dawn, Brock, and Ash as punishment, leading Pikachu to fire off a Thunderbolt of its own to hit Pachirisu and knock it out for now, stopping it from using a Discharge. Although Ash and the gang were bitchy, because all of their hairs were fucking destroyed and messed up and shit. Not just Dawn's, but Brock's and Ash's hair were fucked up too. Suddenly, Dawn got up, as she heard a familiar calling, Dee Dee. Ash and Brock, clueless as to what Dee Dee meant, questioned what it meant, and Dawn simply explained that it was her childhood friend, Kenny. She knew it. And just then, Kenny showed up, revealing himself, introducing himself as Dawn's old childhood friend, and he first notices Dawn's bad hair from the discharge, and mistakes Ash's Pikachu to be Dawn's, saying that must have been how Dawn got that bad hair, although Dawn explains that she actually got it from a Pachirisu, and the Pikachu actually belonged to her friend Ash, as she fixes her hair, and she introduces Ash and Brock to Kenny, explaining that she traveled with them. With that, Dawn, Ash, and Brock fix their hair, and Ash and Brock formally introduce themselves, while Kenny introduces himself to them. Meanwhile, we then cut to Jessie, who was just outside the contest hall, dancing around in her Jesselina outfit, preparing for the contest coming up soon, while Meowth and James supported her by swinging some fans and fanning Jessie as if they were her entourage or some shit. Although, James and Meowth did start to get a little bored from supporting Jessie, because she just kept dancing and dancing and dancing, not doing anything else. James and Meowth occupied themselves by looking at the numerous other coordinators who were training with their Pokemon, preparing for the contest, including a trainer with their Celio, one with a Clefairy, one with a Chansey, one with a Koffing, one with a Magneton, one with a Rapidash, one with a Smeargle, one with a Kricketune, one with a Bidoof, and one with a Beautyfly. Jessie orders James and Meowth to focus their attention only on her, not any other useless coordinators, as she sends out both her Seviper and Dustox, and tells James and Meowth to help her pick which of her Pokemon she should use in the contest. Eventually, though, Jessie just laughs as she decides for herself. She wasn't going to use any of her Pokemon, including Wobbuffet, who forcibly popped out of its Pokeball. James got concerned, fearing that maybe that meant Jessie would want to use his Mime Jr. or Carnivine or Cacnea, but Jessie denied this, saying that she actually wanted to steal a Pokemon to use. Although she wanted to go prepare for the contest and get her outfit fixed up apparently, so she ordered Meowth and James to go steal a Pokemon for her, much to their dismay, as they didn't know what the fuck to do. Meanwhile, we then cut back to outside the Pokemon Center, where Ash and Gang and Kenny were sitting at a table together in the backyard of the center, with Dawn and Kenny reiterating some of their childhood memories. Although Dawn admitted that she couldn't remember what starter Pokemon Kenny said that he chose, because they had stayed up in contact until Kenny had chose his first Pokemon, and then went out on his journey before Dawn did. Kenny laughs at Dawn for forgetting before sending out his starter, who was also a Piplup, although his Piplup by now had evolved into its second stage form, Prinplup. While Prinplup posed, as Dawn was amazed by it, Ash scanned Prinplup with his Pokedex to learn more about it, while Dawn's Piplup walked up to Prinplup and happily greeted it, looking up to it, because, it wanted to evolve into Prinplup, but Prinplup responded by pushing Piplup aside and slapping it away. Kenny was a bit embarrassed by Prinplup's behavior, apologizing, as he explains that Prinplup didn't like when others got too close to it or stood in its way. Prinplup pushing Piplup aside had created a fierce rivalry, as the two Pokemon stared at each other, neither of them backing down, even Piplup, which both Dawn and Kenny were embarrassed by, but Brock said it was only natural for Pokemon of the same species to have rivalries. Although Dawn got a bit worried that Prinplup may do something to Piplup, since it literally towered over it. It was like 3 times its size, basically. Anyways, while this was happening, Kenny playfully accused Dawn of copying him by picking the same starter, but Dawn explained that she and Piplup essentially met each other kind of by accident almost, and she knew that they were meant for each other, so she had to pick it. She had no intention of copying Kenny. Hell, she forgot that Kenny even picked Piplup. Kenny then reveals that he was a coordinator as well, and reveals to Dawn that he watched the Jubilife contest on TV. He saw her perform. And he revealed that he was almost going to come to Jubilife to watch in person, but he didn't want to distract Dawn by coming in person, since he knew that Dawn would likely be busy preparing for her rounds, and he didn't want to distract her. Dawn was surprised to hear that Kenny had become a coordinator, as she didn't remember Kenny ever being interested in Pokemon contests when they were younger, although Kenny simply explains that he recently finished his first contest before Dawn's first contest, and he actually made it to the final round of his contest, but he lost to a very strong trainer named Zoe and her Glameow. Kenny also remembered that Dawn lost to Zoe and her Glameow in the Jubilife contest, and Dawn and Kenny both admitted that Zoe and her Glameow were very strong and could very easily win ribbons, as they decided to have some orange juice with Ash and Brock. Next, Kenny of course reveals that he was of course participating in the contest, and was very confident about winning, while Ash observed that Piplup and Primplup were now walking over to the table. They didn't absolutely hate each other, at least not right now. Maybe they got tired out from staring at each other. Dawn says that she would win the contest, but Kenny says otherwise, and the two of them get into a brief argument before Kenny changes the subject, remembering that Ash also competed in the Jubilife City contest, and he asked if Ash would be competing in the Floroma contest, although Ash explains that he only joined the Jubilife contest because Apom wanted to, and he was actually more interested about conquering the Sinnoh League and collecting all the badges necessary for it, rather than competing in the Grand Festival. Kenny then asks how Ash, Dawn, and Brock met, so Dawn explains that she and Ash met when she saved Ash's Pikachu that had gotten lost, and brought it back to him. And then Brock joined Ash and Dawn shortly after, but also Brock and Ash had been friends for a long time before they met Dawn. Kenny asks Ash some questions, and Ash basically divulges almost his entire life story to Kenny, telling him about a lot of his previous travels. In return, Kenny reveals that he had some stories of his own to share, specifically about Dawn, and childhood stories regarding the two of them, which irritated Dawn, as she didn't want Ash and Brock to learn about her past. But Kenny continued anyways, going on about 3 stories as we saw them through flashbacks. The first one was when Dawn's mom, Johanna, once got her a Chimchar-style haircut that she hated, so Dawn tried getting herself a better one, but it ended up looking even more like a Chimchar. Ash, Brock, Pikachu, and Piplup were on the edge of laughing after this, much to Dawn's annoyance, as Kenny was also on the verge of laughing. And Dawn demanded that everyone stop laughing, which only made Kenny laugh even more. Kenny then goes on to the second story, stating that back when Kenny and Dawn went to the nursery where they first met, Dawn was acting as a slowpoke in a play, and she accidentally sneezed during the play. And as a result, she fell down from the rock she was sitting on, bringing down the cardboard sun that was in the air, and crashing on the 2 other people that were partaking in the play, one guy dressed as a Pikachu, and one guy dressed as a Zubat. This story made Ash and Brock and Piplup and Pikachu almost laugh even more, but they just barely managed to hold it in. Kenny didn't bother holding in his laughter though, as he explained the third story, which was that when Dawn came in pajamas and mismatching shoes, all in one day. Ash found this last story particularly amusing, as he imagined that Dawn probably told people to just shrug off that embarrassing story, just like she always would if something embarrassing happened to her, and Brock agreed. Dawn was immensely angered by all this shit, and wanted to prove that she was not the same as she was as a kid, and she wasn't nearly as dumb, and she wanted to prove this to Kenny by challenging him and his Primplup to a battle. But, much to Dawn's annoyance, Kenny denied Dawn's battle request, saying that he actually wanted to battle against Ash and his Pikachu, because he wanted a real challenge to get ready for the contest. Dawn was annoyed by this, taking it as an insult to her, and Piplup was annoyed because it wanted to face off against its new rival, Primplup, but Ash and Pikachu were excited to battle, and instantly accepted. So, while Brock and Dawn watched from a bench with Piplup on the sidelines, Ash and Kenny and Pikachu and Primplup took their sides on the Pokemon Center's backyard battlefield, getting ready for the battle. It was Primplup versus Pikachu, and the battle started off with Pikachu striking first with a Thunderbolt, while Dawn and Brock eagerly awaited to see who would win. In response to the Thunderbolt, Primplup used a Metal Claw to block the attack, sending the Thunderbolt back towards Pikachu, damaging it a little bit, which Dawn and Brock remarked would have gotten Kenny some points as a coordinator, so Dawn feared that maybe Kenny didn't know what he was doing as a coordinator after all. While Ash and Brock were just shocked by Kenny's strength, as Kenny made the next move, having Primplup charge towards Pikachu with a Drill Peck. At the last second though, Primplup stops running towards Pikachu and jumps up so that it could hit the Drill Peck from above Pikachu to do more damage, although Pikachu did what Dawn would have done, a spin dodge move to dodge the attack, and in the process, it flew by Primplup and smacked it with an Iron Tail, sending Primplup flying towards the ground, crashing down. However, before Primplup actually falls to the ground, it uses a Bubble Beam to soften its fall, basically using the bubbles as momentum to bounce off and land safely on 2 feet on the ground. Pikachu lands safely as well, and Primplup and Pikachu stare each other down, as do Ash and Kenny, while Dawn, Piplup, and Brock watch attentively, wondering who was going to win. Meanwhile, while Jessie was preparing her costume further for the contest, James and Meowth were doing as they were asked, with Wobbuffet, Swiper, and Dustox looking for a Pokemon to steal for Jessie to use in the contest. They were currently watching the battle between Primplup and Pikachu, and they were impressed by Primplup's abilities as they decided to capture it for Jessie to use. Oh yeah, Mime Jr. was there too. Anyways, the battle continued with Pikachu using Iron Tail and Primplup using Metal Claw, and both attacks collided. This led James to see the perfect opportunity to steal Primplup, I guess, as he had Swiper use Haze to blind everyone, including Brock, Dawn, and Piplup on the sidelines, officially interrupting the battle. Dawn and Brock get up to see what was going on, while Ash sends out Staravia and has it use Gust to blow away all of the haze smoke. And so, it was revealed that James, Swiper, Dustox, Mime Jr., Meowth, and Wobbuffet were currently on the battlefield, trying to steal Kenny's Primplup, with Swiper already having used Wrap to wrap up Primplup, frustrating James, as he knew he was caught red-handed. Kenny was furious seeing his Prinplup captured and tried to run over to Prinplup to save it from Seviper, but James then sent out his Cacnea and Carnivine. But unfortunately, Carnivine and Cacnea just bit and hugged James respectively instead of doing any attacking, eventually knocking James over. But Meowth and Dustox still blocked Kenny's path. To make things worse for Kenny, soon enough, Cacnea and Carnivine actually did attack him with Bullet Seed and Pin Missile, but right as Kenny got hit, Ash jumped in and pushed Kenny out of the way, pushing him down to help him avoid the attacks. As the smoke had now entirely dissipated by this point, and Ash and Kenny reunited with Dawn and Brock as Brock held her Piplup. He wasn't happy, however, as he ordered James and Meowth to give his Prinplup back, but James and Meowth just laughed as Seviper continued to wrap Prinplup and threatened to poison tail it if anyone made another move closer to Team Rocket. So Ash and the gang were frustrated as they could only just stand and do absolutely nothing as Team Rocket started to walk away, backing up. And to make sure that Ash and the gang and Kenny didn't try and pull a fast one on them, Meowth suggested that they have the rest of the Pokemon attack Ash and the gang and Kenny. James agreed, so Cacnea used Pin Missile, Dustox used Psybeam, and Carnivine used Bullet Seed to attack Ash and the gang and Kenny. Brock advised everyone to dodge, but the attacks were too quick. Thankfully though, Piplup suddenly jumped up, and much to everyone's shock, they realized that Piplup learned a new move suddenly, Whirlpool, and after using the Whirlpool, it was able to absorb all the incoming attacks from Team Rocket's Pokemon, completely negating them, much to everyone's absolute shock and amazement. And James, Meowth, and all their Pokemon were just shocked, not amazed whatsoever. Ash and the gang and Kenny continue to watch in awe as Piplup redirects the force of the massive whirlpool towards James, Meowth, and all their Pokemon, which engulfs Team Rocket, almost drowning them, with the exception of Prinplup, because it was a water type, so it can breathe underwater, and because of the whirlpool, Seviper had lost its grip on Prinplup, so Prinplup was able to free itself from Seviper's grasp. The whirlpool then dissipated, and much to Team Rocket's relief, they didn't drown. Kenny was relieved as his Prinplup ran back to Piplup and thanked it for helping him before returning to Kenny. Team Rocket tried their best to escape before they could get blasted off, but this failed as Prinplup and Piplup decided to put their rivalry aside and sent Team Rocket blasting off by working together and firing a dual bubble beam, which caused a massive explosion, sending James, Meowth, and all their Pokemon blasting off. Ash and the gang and Kenny thank Prinplup and Piplup for their help, although they primarily thank Piplup, as Piplup falls to the ground, tired as fuck, after using that new, very strong Whirlpool move. Dawn and Ash were concerned, but Brock knew that Piplup would wake up eventually, and soon enough, it did, embarrassed by all the praise it was now getting as it rubbed the back of its head, which was injured when it collapsed, but it would get over the injury very quick. Ash and the gang and Kenny then discussed how they were super excited to see how Piplup would fare in the upcoming contest if it could use that beautiful Whirlpool move. Meanwhile, after blasting off, James, Meowth, and all the Pokemon returned to Jessie, who was awaiting somewhere in the contest hall, and admitted that they failed to steal her Pokemon, even though they tried. Jessie was angry as hell at this, but she soon got over it, and simply just said that she now had to train Dustox and Seviper to use one of them in the contest, and Dustox and Seviper agreed to join in, promising to do their best, even though Jessie wasn't thrilled to use them. Nighttime then arrives, and we cut to the Pokemon Center, where Ash and the gang and Kenny were. They had just watched as Kenny gave Prinplup to Nurse Joy and her Chansey, and Nurse Joy and her Chansey soon came back with Prinplup, all healed and ready to go for tomorrow in the contest. Kenny then confidently promised Dawn that he would be the one to win the contest and get the ribbon, making Dawn angry as she clarified that she would be the one to win the contest and get the ribbon, leaving Brock, Ash, and Pikachu impressed by both Dawn and Kenny's determination. And Kenny laughs at Dawn's anger. We then cut to the next day in the Floroma Town contest hall, where the contest was about to begin, as Marion was announcing the contest and hyping up the audience who was getting seated in the hall, while she played a video on the TV screen of herself dancing in a whole bunch of Floroma Town's signature flowers, hyping up the audience even more. Amongst the audience was Ash and Brock with Pikachu and Baniri. Pikachu and Baniri were both outfitted with cheerleader outfits, determined to cheer Dawn on during the contest. James, Meowth, and Wobbuffet were also in the audience, and they were absolutely praying that Jessie would be victorious in the contest, because then she would be happy. If she didn't win, then Jessie would be utterly furious, and she would take out her anger on James, Meowth, and Wobbuffet because they failed to capture a new Pokemon. Marion then gets the crowd's attention as she shows off what the winning coordinator would get as a prize, the Floroma Town orange ribbon. We then cut to backstage, where Kenny, Dawn, and Jessie, under her Jesselina pseudonym, were preparing for the contest. While watching with all the other coordinators in the waiting room, Marion talking about the prize ribbon. Dawn was in her signature pink dress, while Kenny was in a cool green suit with yellow shoulder pads. Dawn showed off her beautiful dress to Kenny, and Kenny got embarrassed at the fact that Dawn was wearing a beautiful dress, kind of insinuating that Kenny liked Dawn this whole time. Dawn got really close to Kenny and asked him what the fuck was wrong, and Kenny just lied that he was feeling a little nervous. He didn't want to reveal anything about his feelings to Dawn. As for Jessie, what she was doing to prepare was just staring at herself in the mirror, amazed by what she believed was beautiful makeup that she was wearing. We then cut to the main contest hall as Marion hypes up the audience some more and introduces the three judges for the contest, Raul Contesta, Mr. Tsukizo, and the Floroma Town Nurse Joy, who all say a few words, introducing themselves and wishing all the coordinators luck as the crowd cheers. Without further ado, Marion calls out the first coordinator onto the stage, none other than Dawn. And as soon as Dawn comes on stage, Baniri, Pikachu, Ash, and Brock cheered immensely. Dawn then, of course, sent out her Pokemon, choosing Pachirisu, and Pachirisu came out in a very beautiful way, thanks to the beautiful seal on its Pokeball, and she immediately had it open up with a very beautiful discharge. Although this impressed the audience at first, the discharge went out of control, causing Dawn to panic. Kenny started to panic as well, seeing how not only was the discharge going out of control, but Pachirisu was going insane and rolls over to the judges, crashing into the judge's desk, which Raul Contesta, Nurse Joy, and Mr. Sukizo actually thought was pretty cute. Ash and Brock started to panic, realizing that the reason why Pachirisu was going insane was because this was its first contest and it was experiencing stage fright. Pachirisu got even more insane as it started to run around in circles all around the stage. Dawn was panicking, but eventually she managed to get an idea on how to fix the issue. She was determined not to lose because of Pachirisu's stage fright. What will happen? Find out next time on Pokemon Ball Z.